Good morning, friends. Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the board of directors, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed by our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed by our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I just have one announcement. I'd like to say that the rummage sale went really good. We made about $1,320. And on behalf of the fundraising ministry, Roz, Carla, Sandy, and Carrie, I want to give a thanks to Rachel, Sally, Medea, Jeff, Teresa and Caitlin, Tina and Brian, and Andrea, who came in through the week and helped us clean up yesterday. And I just have a special thanks to Roz, Jeff, Tracy, and Sandy, who spent the week before helping Rita Johnson and her brother clear out 2 storage bins and packing things up, helping them move and helping bring things here. They worked for 2 weeks in a row. Okay. Pastor Tom is in the pulpit today, and we are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Wearing masks is optional right now, but if you are ill or think you've had contact with someone that has had COVID, please attend virtually. Now, let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you're attending worship with #First Unitarian Hobart, and please silence your devices and take a deep breath and another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
If you would, join me with lighting the chalice. I think it's on. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light the beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of a life we share together.
Our opening words this morning: may we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in ministry, in mystery, in miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. To extend, to reach into that practice, that experience, that knowledge, that wisdom of this larger community, I invite you to open your gray hymnals to hymn 318, We Would Be One, and rise in body or spirit and join in song.
And now, join me in saying the affirmation of faith. It is printed on your laminated handouts in the pews and the order of service. Love is a doctrine of His church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. And thank you to our tech team. We only have one up there today, so yay! For live streaming and making this possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile reach your face.
Hello, hello. Good morning. Please be seated. So, each week in our worship service, we share joys and sorrows, milestones, concerns, the things that we bring with us on our hearts each week as we gather for our worship services. So I'd like to invite you to share with us what is on your heart. What joys or sorrows or milestones, concerns have you brought with you? I'll walk around with the mic, and I would ask you to just share your name at the outset so that we know who you are. Does anybody have any joys or sorrows? Yes.
I'm Connie Barnes. Brian and I got through our 3-day 60th plus reunion and Logansport High School. And on Monday, October 3rd, I had cataract surgery on my left eye. And tomorrow, I will have cataract surgery on my right eye. And we're both surviving.
Wow, so much. Thank you for sharing that. Other joys, yes, sorrows, concerns.
Hi, I'm Noelle, and I have a joy. I was just talking with Jen on the way over here to church, and we were having a conversation about LGBTQ support, and she went to something last night in Valparaiso, and I was commenting that it was just so nice that in that community, this is becoming more and more available and present. And she was talking about how there was an outpouring of support ahead of time from the Porter County chapter of NOW. And I had another different event I attended last night where they announced that the bathroom in this Trinity Episcopal Church in Michigan City was now unisex, and so the Pink Ladies Room was now for everyone to use. And just small things just feel more welcoming, and so that's my joy.
Thank you, Noel. Wonderful. Other joys, sorrows, milestones, concerns? Well, in gratitude for all that has been shared and all that remains in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, may we continue to weave our experiences as individuals into a larger tapestry of experience as a community.
Good morning, everyone. Our story for all ages today comes from the Scandinavian, from Scandinavia, and it's the legend of the mistletoe. Of all the Nordic gods and goddesses, Balder was the most beloved. This beautiful, radiant harbinger of mercy and kindness was the wisest in every dispute. The delicate chamomile flower became his emblem, for his gentleness was felt by all. Beloved as he was, Balder was not free from despair. Night after night, he was visited by terrible dreams of gloom and grief. At last, he went to his mother Frigga in hopes that she might lift the sorrow from his heart. When Frigga looked into her son's eyes, she became filled with dread, for she saw that he was being courted by the cold shadow of death. So began a mother's journey to protect her son. Frigga traveled throughout each of the 9 worlds, gathering oaths from all things: fire, water, iron, and stone. Each plant and every disease, all things swore to Frigga that they would do nothing to harm her son. When she returned home, these oaths were put to a test. Hermod, the bold messenger of the gods, was the first to challenge the power of the oath. He threw his mighty battle axe at Balder. It hurtled through the air, but the metal of the blade and the wood of the handle withheld their power. The axe dropped harmlessly at his feet. Then a mighty shout of joy rose from the gods. Balder, whom they loved, was safe. They spent the day on the plain known as the Peacestead, hurling knives and stones at their invincible target. In the midst of it all stood Balder, radiant and shining, as all around him fell useless every kind of weapon God or man could devise. But there are some who don't like beauty, some whose feelings twist at unvarnished joy. Among the Nordic gods, that one is called Loki, and he looked for a way to end the happiness. He sidled over to Balder's blind brother Hot and soon discovered that Frigga's work had caused this unnatural state of affairs. Loki then transformed himself into an old woman and hobbled off to Frigga's halls to talk with her. "May I come in?" Loki quavered. "I've traveled a long way and I've just seen a terrible sight." Frigga welcomed the old woman in and called for refreshments. They sat down together and Loki spoke. "There's a terrible sport going on at Peacestead. All the gods are ganging up on one man, throwing their spears and weapons at him." Frigga smiled at the old woman and said kindly, "Oh, the one they are throwing their weapons at is my son Balder, and he cannot be harmed. I have taken an oath from all things never to hurt him. How like a mother's love to leave nothing to chance. Still, for your sake, I hope you asked absolutely everything to swear." Frigga's eyes grew soft. "I have gathered oaths from all except the mistletoe which grows west of Valhalla. It seemed too young to give an oath." "Yes, I'm sure it's too young. Oh, but look how the light is fading. I really must be on my way." The old woman hobbled outside and transformed into Loki. As darkness descended, he raced west to find the mistletoe. In those times, the mistletoe grew from the ground. Loki uprooted it, stripped it of its leaves, and sharpened one end to a fine point. Then he hurried off to the Peacestead. When he arrived there, he grimaced with delight. Frigga herself had come to watch the gaming. Loki sauntered over to Hot, who was standing disconsolate in a corner. "Hot, doesn't it feel terrible to be left out of all the fun? Doesn't it make you angry that everyone has forgotten you? But here, I've got a little dart for you. Close your fingers around it and I'll guide your hand. Throw it at your brother." The mistletoe dart flew through the air and pierced Balder's chest. It went deep into his heart, and the god of light collapsed, lifeless. The terrible dream had come true. Frigga, weeping, cradled her son's body. As her tears fell, they became gentle white berries on the barren twig. Despair lay in everyone's heart, for the best and the beautiful had been taken. Still, Frigga would not give in. She sent Hermod to Hela's kingdom of death to plead for Balder's return. There, in Death's kingdom, Hermod spoke silver-tongued words to the grim goddess herself. "Hela, I have come to plead for one who is greatly missed, and I mean Balder, who belongs among us and whom we cannot live without." "I'm not sure Balder is as beloved as you would have me believe," Hela rasped. "We shall put it to the test. Since hatred and malice brought about this end, then let everyone give up their long-standing grievances and their evil thoughts in exchange for his return. If all will let go of memories of past wrongs and clear a place of forgiveness in their hearts, then Hela shall not hold Balder back. When fleet Hermod returned with a message for the gods, Frigga stood filled with blessing of relief. I will be the first to open my heart for my son's return, she said. And as a token of this, the mistletoe, which has slain my son, I raise up to a special place of honor. No longer shall it grow out of the earth, but it shall be supported by the great oak, suspended between heaven and earth. And whoever meets beneath it, be they enemies or friends, shall embrace and forgive and open their hearts one to the other.
I invite you to open your teal hymnals to hymn 1037. There's a refrain that gets sung after each spoken line. And so as we go through, I'll read off the different line that comes up, and we'll join together in singing that refrain. The refrain being, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. Please rise in body or spirit for us to begin. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
Please be seated. The poet David White has written some words about forgiveness that goes, "Forgiveness is a heartache and difficult to achieve because, strangely, it not only refuses to eliminate the original wound, but actually draws us closer to its source. To approach forgiveness is to close in on the nature of the hurt itself, the only remedy being, as we approach its raw center, to reimagine our relation to it. It may be that the part of us that was struck and hurt can never forgive, and that, strangely, forgiveness never arises from the part of us that was actually wounded. The wounded self may be the part of us incapable of forgetting, and perhaps not actually meant to forget, as if, like the foundational dynamics of the physiological immune system, our psychological defenses must remember and organize against any future attacks. After all, the identity of the one who must forgive is actually founded on the very fact of having been wounded. Stranger still, he writes, it is that wounded, branded, unforgetting part of us that eventually makes forgiveness an act of compassion rather than one of simply forgetting. To forgive is to assume a larger identity than the person who was first hurt. To mature and bring to fruition an identity that can put its arm not only around the afflicted one within us, but also around the memories that are seared within us by the original blow, and through a kind of psychological virtuosity, extend our understanding to one who first delivered it. Forgiveness is a skill, he writes, a way of preserving clarity, sanity, and generosity in an individual life. A beautiful way of shaping the mind to a future we want for ourselves. An admittance that if forgiveness comes through understanding, and if understanding is just a matter of time and application, then we might as well begin forgiving right at the beginning of any drama, rather than put ourselves through the full cycle of festering and incapacitation and reluctant healing and eventual blessing. To forgive is to put oneself in a larger gravitational field of experience than the one that first seemed to hurt us. We reimagine ourselves in the light of our maturity, and we reimagine the past in the light of our new identity. We allow ourselves to be gifted by a story larger than the story that first hurt us and left us bereft. He concludes, at the end of life, the wish to be forgiven is ultimately the chief desire of almost every human being. In refusing to wait, in extending forgiveness to others now, we begin the long journey of becoming the person who will be large enough, able enough, and generous enough to receive, at the very end, that absolution ourselves. At this point in our series, I want to kind of back up and take a bit of a larger view on what we've been talking about over the past couple months. Sociologist Robert Bellah worked with a number of other social scientists a couple decades ago and wrote this book called Habits of the Heart, which talks about our society and the norms that we are raised into. And he found in his research that in the myths of our culture, there are two countervailing tendencies. The fear that society may overwhelm the individual and destroy any chance of autonomy unless he stands against it. And secondly, the recognition that it is only in relation to society that the individual can fulfill himself, and that if the break with society is too radical, life has no meaning at all. He writes that a deep and continuing theme in American literature is the hero who must leave society, alone or with one or a few others, in order to realize the moral good in the wilderness, at sea, or on the margins of a settled society. And this connection between moral courage and lonely individualism is all over the place in our American stories. James Fenimore Cooper's The Deerslayer, Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, pretty much any cowboy story you've ever heard, pretty much any hard-boiled detective story you've ever heard, all play in this same realm. This link between moral courage and lonely individualism. The cowboy America is the inventor of that most mythic individual hero who again and again saves a society that he can never completely fit into. The cowboy has a special talent. He can shoot straighter and faster than other men, and a special sense of justice. But these characteristics also make him so unique that he can never fully belong to society. His destiny is to defend society without ever really joining it. And so he rides off alone into the sunset like Shane or like the Lone Ranger, accompanied only by his companion. But the cowboy's importance is not that he is isolated or antisocial. Rather, his significance lies in his unique individual virtue and special skill, and it is because of those qualities that society needs and welcomes him. Or take the case of the detective, also a loner. And to seek justice in a corrupt society, the American detective must be tough, and above all, he must be a loner, and he lives outside the normal bourgeois pattern of career and family. And as his investigations begin to lead him beyond the initial crime of the glamorous and powerful center of society, its leaders make attempts to buy off the detective. And this counterpoint to the gradual unraveling of the crime is the battle the detective wages within his own integrity. In the end, rejecting the money of the powerful and spurning, sometimes jailing or killing the beautiful woman who has tried to seduce him. And the hard-boiled detective who may long for love and success, for a place in society, is finally driven to stand alone, resisting the blandishments of society, to pursue a lonely crusade for justice. And sometimes, as in the film Chinatown, corruption is so powerful and so total that the honest detective no longer has a place to stand, and the message is one of unrelieved cynicism. And so these stories that we are brought up on in our society, that we are told and that we tell each other again and again, teach us that in order to serve society, we must stand alone, not needing others, not depending on their judgment, not submitting to their wishes. It's a kind of heroic selflessness. And one accepts the necessity of remaining alone in order to serve the values of the group. And this obligation to aloneness is an important key to the American moral imagination, he writes. Yet it is part of the profound ambiguity of the mythology of American individualism that its moral heroism is always just a step away from despair. The character of Ahab in Moby Dick, and occasionally for a cowboy or a detective, there is no return to society. There is no moral redemption. And this individualism just results in a clash between autonomy and conformity. There are so many resources in our society that are aimed at helping the individual self. If you go to a bookstore, there is a self-help section. But the practice of building love in a community in this context doesn't have its section in the bookstore. Our capacity for at-one-ment has atrophied. And so the intention of these past couple months and into the next few weeks is to put our attention on these skills of turning, of returning back to ourselves, returning back to our relationships with one another, of practicing these skills of confession and forgiveness, of knitting our relationships in a way that we often weren't taught to growing up. And I am no more above this than anybody else. I was raised in the same society as you all. When I was in grad school, I'd received a fellowship to teach this class, and in the midst of exchanging some emails with one of the deans about it, I received this response. I would personally prefer if you kept the form of our email exchanges with me at a more professional level, including forms of professional courtesy, such as greetings, the use of please, clearly articulated requests, and a signature. I understand situations when we may go back and forth on a topic the same day, but this is not such a case. I hope you understand, and if not, please feel free to ask for more clarity about what I am saying. The informal message below to me reads like if one of my best friends or closest colleagues were writing to me, and this is not the context of our relationship. Also, I would argue that this may be a helpful exercise for you to practice professional boundaries and cross-cultural professional communication. It will be beneficial to your future ministry, teaching, and academic work. And also, please reflect on how the assumption that you can write with such informality to me may be informed by some issues of privilege, entitlement, or cultural assumptions that may actually be offensive to others. This is not the way I ever addressed faculty or staff when I was a student, nor do I now write in such an informal way to core or adjunct faculty, staff, or students with whom I do not have a particularly close and intense working relationship. I am not offended now, but I did find your message problematic, and this is why I am clearly stating my feedback. I hope it can be helpful to you. And so when I received this email, I was taken aback. All I had done was leave out the initial "Dear so-and-so" and the "Sincerely Tom Bozeman" at the end, and been a little bit informal in the way that I'd phrased things. And I did this because I knew that she was a busy person, and I wanted to be as brief and to the point as possible, and I was trying to do her a favor, for Pete's sake. And so in looking back at this exchange and preparing it, it was fascinating to look back and remember all of this that brought up for me. I could feel myself getting riled up anew. And so I tried responding with a carefully worded reply, which wasn't met the way that I wanted it to, and it went back and forth, and the anxiety and the frustration on both of our parts went up and up and up. And throughout the whole experience, this rising tension and anxiety would happen. And I would walk into the building and immediately feel uncomfortable because of the association with this exchange that was going on. My entire experience of the institution had shifted from one of openness and excitement to one of being closed off, uncomfortable, resistant. And I remember having a conversation with my advisor who specifically said, "Hey, Tom, it seems like you're carrying something really charged. I would encourage you to take some steps to mend these relationships." And I remember thinking to myself, sure, when they start, I would be happy to do that. So each of us, I'm sure, has experience of something like that. In a romantic relationship with somebody, maybe somebody said something that threw us and we started to close down, or nothing was said and we have this feeling that they don't like us or are angry with us or look down on us, we start to close down. Or at work, maybe the boss is really critical or unsupportive and we start to dread going into work that day. Or with a friend, maybe something happens which has us question how good of a friend they really are, and we start to retreat from the relationship. It's the kind of experience that tends to trigger the mind to come up with things that we do or don't want to do with a lot of weight around them. Or maybe even ruminate and think of all the comebacks that we could concoct in our minds, yearning to become that protagonist cowboy or detective, to be the quick-witted lawyer on the TV show or the quick-witted comedian on the Daily Show, to capably squash or skewer our opponent, or in the parlance of so many headlines, to destroy them. In those instances of closing down, of dread, of retreat, there's this sense of our vision narrowing, of getting more and more uncomfortable in our bodies. the jumble of nerves and anger and frustration and fear, of wanting to fortify ourselves against attack or loss, and the possibility of assuming a larger identity, as David White put it, starts to recede. The part of us that is called forth into battle is the one that has a lot of stories about what is going on, about what is the right side and the wrong side of what we need to cling to and make happen. This time of year, in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur is one of the key high holidays. And one of the things that uniquely could happen historically on Yom Kippur is that somebody could enter the Holy of Holies, the center of the temple that was carried around in the desert for decades by the Hebrews as they traveled, that no one was allowed in, absolutely no one, for most of the time. But this time of Yom Kippur allows an accessing of emptiness, a rehearsal of emptiness, the emptiness that came before we arrived into this world, and the emptiness that comes when we leave it. This rehearsal, this facing in the bigger picture, is part of this practice at this time of the year. As Rabbi Liu put it, we need a taste of this emptiness to give us a sense of what will go with us, what will endure as we make this great crossing. What's important? What is the core of our life? What will live on after the wind and space? What will be worthy of that endless, infinitely powerful silence? And what are we clinging to that isn't important, that won't endure, that isn't worthy? What do we want to live on? Our money, our pride, our anger, our selfishness? If not, we better let them go now before they become what we are, what we will always be in that great emptiness for which we are bound. What lives on in the people we have loved and lost? What breaks our hearts when we think of them? What do we miss so much that it aches? Precisely the suchness, the unspeakable, ineffable, intangible quality which takes up no space at all, and which never did. That's what survives that great crossing. That's what makes it through the passage from life to death. And we taste death on Yom Kippur to remind us of what we must hold on to and what we must let go of who we are and where we come from. We taste death on Yom Kippur to remind us that death forgives, and that Yom Kippur is a little death, and that they both cover over. As our friends, the Buddhists, cheerfully remind us, he continues, suffering is inevitable in life. It is, in fact, life's first noble truth. Suffering is endemic to the experience of being alive, and Yom Kippur is the day when we Jews also acknowledge the truth of this. We acknowledge that we have fallen short, and we acknowledge that life has fallen short of our expectations as well. Life is a series of crushing disappointments. As Kurt Vonnegut once said, maturity is a bitter disappointment for which no remedy exists. And the fact is that as life progresses, most of us find ourselves living our lives amongst the mounting debris of shattered hope. And there's something about this possibility of annual practice of facing the larger picture, of facing the matters of life and death that can reorient us. This encountering of life and death can feel like a moment of clarity. There was a politician after September 11th who said, "Until now, I have always been able to make difficult decisions when I had to. But this time I have found in thinking about it, in suffering over it, that something that is very painful and very difficult but also very beautiful happens to you. It makes you figure out what you're really all about and what's really important to you. It makes you figure out what should be important to you and where the core of you really exists. I guess because I've been in politics so long, I used to think the core of me was in politics, but perhaps it isn't. These moments of insight can come upon us, and they can drift away, as moments of insight often do, without a regular practice of revisiting them. The speaker of those words was none other than Rudy Giuliani, who in recent years, I would say, has grown enamored of politics once again. The value of a community is in reminding ourselves of these moments of truth, these moments of insight, of holding one another to the truth that we see. Many of you might remember the shooting that happened in Pennsylvania 16 years ago on October 2nd, when a man took hostages and killed some of them and himself at an Amish school in Pennsylvania. It was a horrible event, but the response from the deeply religious community was the main part that made headlines for weeks and months and years afterwards. On the very day of the shooting, the relatives of the victims reached out to the family of the shooter to comfort them. And 10 years later, the mother of the shooter said, "I will never forget the devastation caused by my son." But one of the fathers the other night, he said, "None of us would have ever chosen this. But the relationships that we have built through it, you can't put a price on that. You can't put a price on that." Covenant is not and was never a one and done thing. Even in the Hebrew Bible, where our very concept of covenant comes from, it is continually in a process of being broken and broken again and repaired again. And every time we miss the mark is a new opportunity to build something anew, to choose a new path together. I mentioned last week that a covenant should be lofty enough that it's really challenging to live up to consistently, both because it involves us leaning more into growth than complacency, and also because it provides us more opportunities to actively, thoughtfully, consciously, intentionally construct and nurture our connections with one another. And this is how we weave new patterns, new stories, bringing a love and a hope to bear in our lives that might otherwise stay out of our grasp. There is a saying that goes, if we're not careful, we'll end up where we're going. And this process, this practice of revisiting the truths that life and death show us, of having a community that reminds us of what we're trying to live up to, can have us not end up where we're going, but choose a different path that lives up to what we actually desire, what actually is in alignment with our integrity. And so your homework over this coming week is to lean into whatever forgiveness might be there for you. One of the keys to forgiveness is to not force it. And the other key is to not just let it sit there. So this isn't me saying, make sure that you forgive anybody that ever has done you any harm. Because there's a possibility of rushing it, but there's also a possibility of just ignoring it. So just feel into what forgiveness might be possible from where you're at, from what is living inside of you. What might it be possible for you to release? And this could be something that you speak aloud to somebody. This could be something that you just release inside of yourself, whatever feels most right to you. But over this coming week, building off of our practice last week of confessing things that we might have done over this coming week, what forgiveness in you might you be able to practice, so that we may entrust ourselves with so great a power as to begin something anew, to entrust ourselves and one another with this great power to begin anew, just as Balder's mother Frigga pledged, and as the Amish community of West Nickel-Mines practiced. Let us also be the first to open our hearts. Let us strengthen our capacities for at-one-ment, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding, to relax our grip on our need to defend or be right or be the hero who wins out, and to let us allow ourselves to bow and to bend and to turn and return again to the not aloneness that is inherent in being a social being. And may we ever practice that together.
Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the cups goes to our Faith in Action ministry and a different charity chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the Family Giving Project that Tracy talked about last week. For those not here with us today, there's an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. And I already have our volunteers.
Quick announcement about the Family Giving Project. Tracy reminded us it's an annual thing every year. It's all the donations in the cups for October, November. What we didn't know last week is who the recipients are. We have Myra, a member of this church, active member of this church, many of you know. She works for Hearts in Motion. Hearts in Motion is in alliance with St. Jude Battered Women's Shelter in Crown Point. And there are 23 women with children who are graduating from St. Jude's into apartments. Hearts in Motion furnishes the apartments. St. Jude finds the apartments and helps with the initial rent. What we're going to do as a community is collect money for 2 months, buy gift cards for all 23 families. So please be generous. All the money will go to buy gift cards for the 23 women and children. And in addition to that, our member Stephanie Dow, who works for the Veterans Administration, has encouraged us to collect blankets because as the weather gets colder, many veterans sleep in their cars. So she will take the blankets and distribute them. So we've already collected some from the rummage sale. So please donate any clean blankets to the church in the next couple months. Thank you.
For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. And now please rise as you're willing and able and join in singing the closing hymn, number 16 in the gray hymnal.
Closing words from Wayne Arneson this morning. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.
Will you join me as we extinguish the flame? The words are printed in your pew cards or in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we rise together again.